If you guys don't mind, I'm gonna leave that off. Hello. Today's gonna be a different video than usual because we're gonna just we're gonna go to sleep, Jub. I've seen other content creators do this, and I thought that it was a really interesting concept for a video where we're gonna be kind of talking about 9 different games that were extremely impactful on my life for one reason or another. All of these games have affected me on a personal level. And it's going to be kind of a ranty video, just a heads up, where I'm going to kind of just, let myself go with each of the different games and kind of just, it's not like I have a script or anything. I just kind of want to chill with you guys and just talk about some of my favorite games. So with that said, here they are. These are the most influential games on my life. Obviously, this is different than my favorite games of all time, because that could be a whole different video, honestly speaking. But these are the games that ended up impacting me on a personal level, and in a lot of ways, you could actually look at this catalog and kind of know more about me as a person, I guess I would say. I know that sounds kind of weird, but anyone who's played video games and is as passionate about video games as I am can kind of look at these and understand a few things, and even for me going through this list, like, it was actually pretty difficult to pick down, to whittle through some of these games. There was some honorable mentions would be like Dark Souls 3, Little Nightmares 1 and 2, as more recent titles, and then an old N64 game called Mystical Ninja starring Gomon. These are kind of the games where I thought about them long and hard and whether or not they deserved to be on the list. And despite the fact that I think that they did, these were games, the ones that I'd chosen today are the ones that were just higher up. It's like I'm very happy and confident with the list we've got today. So starting off with Grand Theft Auto 3. Grand Theft Auto 3, I remember, I think Grand Theft Auto 3 was the first game for me that was like an event. So it's the first game that I stayed up all night playing. I stayed up, till midnight there was the midnight sale at EB Games, which my parents took me to, and then we stood in line and I got my copy of the game and I went home and I played the game all night. And I'm pretty sure it's the first game that I played. I think I played it for like 30 hours or something like that straight before I finally ended up going to bed or something. Overall, it was just the fact that I'd never been that excited about a game before. Maybe since. I mean, obviously I've been excited about games nowadays, but this was a huge deal because this was a game that, it was kind of like from Super Nintendo Mario to Mario 64 level of a step up, and arguably Grand Theft Auto 6 or Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto 5. Grand Theft Auto 5 is basically the same game, just a lot more refined, is kind of what I'm saying, whereas GTA 3 was literally going from a top-down Grand Theft Auto game into 3D. And I remember the thing that I was most excited about the game was because it was 3D, the camera was going to be behind the vehicle, because I played GTA 2 and I enjoyed it. But anytime I would start driving fast or whatever, I would find that I would always bump into things, and I was really frustrated that I couldn't see where I was going because you were kind of just stuck with this box camera, But GTA 3, I mean, I can still kind of remember the intro cutscene and everything, and it's just, there's so many things that I remember so vividly with it. The mission variety was just so much better than modern GTA games. It was a lot more chaotic, but that's what I enjoy in video games. Like, you could, there's so many different options that you could end up doing to complete missions. There's so many vehicles you could get. Like, I know in modern Grand Theft Auto, you have to go out and buy almost all the vehicles, whereas in GTA 3, you would basically just have to steal them and bring them back to your garage, and then you would end up owning them, including some of those super difficult cars to get, like the CIA vehicle or even some of the army vehicles. And I remember specifically, catching a CIA vehicle was extremely difficult because cops would literally just spawn everywhere, and you basically had to have a wanted level to get the CIA car to show up, and then you had to get the car and put it in your garage. All the while, the game didn't let you go into the garage when you had a wanted level. So it was just all this, you know, crazy chaotic thing. But I don't want to get into all of my memories about the game, because otherwise we'll be here all day just talking about GTA. But since then, I've been a GTA fan wholeheartedly, loved every single one of them, excited as hell for GTA 6, and also, coincidentally, really excited about the Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City remasters that apparently have been announced. So those will end up being really, really cool, especially if they add multiplayer. That would be dope. So moving on to the next game, which is Turok 2. This was probably one of my favorite games through childhood. Like, GTA 3 was, kind of the first game that it was like an experience, like waiting up all night and playing it for such a long time. Turok 2 was one of my favorite games where I'd played through it so many times. And I also owe my respect and adoration towards the game and how much I enjoy Turok 2 to why my channel even exists, because frankly speaking, I'd watched lots of YouTubers and thought about making a YouTube channel and stuff, but I kind of needed that extra push. I needed an excuse to do it, and that's where Turok came in, because I wanted an excuse to replay through Turok 2, my childhood favorite game, and that was the first game that I ended up actually playing on the channel. And around that time too with the channel, I ended up making a lot of, really good friends with people in the comments and stuff. But the point is that this was a game that I just played to death, and I learned like so many things from you guys in the comments. I don't know if anybody who watched my Turok 2 series is even still here nowadays on the channel, but I'd learned and shared information with you guys as well. I learned that a lot of the original developers of Turok 2, the company unfortunately was going bankrupt, after Turok 2, because they were being really ambitious with their ideas. Turok 3 is kind of more of a tech demo, but it still has a lot of ideas that were really ambitious, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, these guys ended up making Retro Studios, which are the same team that are currently making the Metroid Prime games and working on Metroid Prime 4, which I'm wholeheartedly excited for. And I didn't know any of that stuff growing up with this game. I didn't keep up with companies or anything. I still don't really keep my ear to the ground in terms of what company developed what game, outside of if I see like one of the big companies, it'll be like something where I know it's going to be good and know to be excited about it. But generally speaking, I thought that was really, really cool to hear that my childhood favorite game, which actually was really ambitious at the time, even though a lot of people didn't, I feel like it's an underappreciated gem. But it was cool to hear that these guys ended up moving on to making the Metroid Prime games, which I feel took a lot of the mechanics that they ended up developing or wanting to develop with their games, being the passionate developers that they are, and ended up getting recognized for it, because Metroid Prime is kind of a very revered series, and even one of my favorites. Moving on to Half-Life 2, I think this would probably be the first game that got me into PC gaming. I remember I built a PC specifically around playing this game. I created a Steam account specifically because you had to in order to play this game. And I just, I was still a console gamer at the time. And even when I ended up having a PC, I would still largely be playing a lot of games on console, especially because there was a lot of exclusive games back then. But yeah, eventually, like, that's kind of what ended up influencing me getting into like full-on PC gaming, actually like upgrading my computer more regularly so I could play the most modern games and stuff. Not to say that I was never a PC gamer. Obviously looking further on the list, we've got like Battlefield 1942 and even Nexus TK, which were PC games specifically. But with Half-Life 2, it's kind of the first game where I actually like upgraded my computer for it. And Steam has obviously had huge influence with all of that. I ended up getting Half-Life Orange Box just because it ended up having Half-Life and the expansion content and so on and so forth. I don't really have that much to say about the game that hasn't already been said by hundreds of other people, because frankly speaking, if you play Half-Life 2, it still holds up today as being a really, really good game. And honestly, I'd recommend that if you haven't already done it, there's actually multiplayer mods that are pretty cool, and for the most part they work, and co-op mods are something that I just always love, as we'll talk about with multiplayer a little bit later in the video. So now we're moving on to Splinter Cell, which those of you that have been with the channel long enough and seen my reaction videos to E3 and so on and so forth, where we've had Ubisoft come up, you know, and talk about their games, which most of them suck nowadays anyways. Splinter Cell's that one game that I really want Ubisoft to not only acknowledge existed, but I want them to make like one last game, you know, because the funny thing is I can remember it so well, where growing up, I ended up getting Metal Gear Solid 2, and my brother bought Splinter Cell, and this is such a strange situation. It's never happened to me before, or since, actually, where I was really big into the PlayStation and my brother was you know, playing Splinter Cell on Xbox, and both of us ended up playing through both of the games, and we didn't really, like, I wasn't really super into Splinter Cell, watching him play it. Like, I don't even remember really watching him play it, because I wasn't as interested. He didn't end up watching me play through Metal Gear as much either. But then eventually, somewhere down the line, like, we ended up beating both of the games respectively, and then we tried each other's games and tried them out. And I ended up becoming a Splinter Cell fan, and that's when I ended up getting really into Xbox at the time. And then my brother ended up getting into Metal Gear, and, you know, since then I bought every Splinter Cell game and he bought every Metal Gear game, and we always watched each other play through each of them. And I mean, I loved the Splinter Cell franchise. Splinter Cell 1 Pandora Tomorrow was also one of my favorite games, despite the fact that everybody hated it. Chaos Theory was, it had some nice mechanics to it, but generally it was kind of where you could feel the change in the game, where they were trying to keep up with the times, because it's a stealth game, and, you know, stealth games aren't popular, and Ubisoft started seeing what Call of Duty was doing, and so they started doing that with all the Assassin's Creed games and stuff. Like, back in the day, Ubisoft used to actually make games that were really, really good, and that's why people were supporting them, and that's why they became such a big company. You know, even the first few Assassin's Creed games were not just all copy and paste of one another. They were actually something brand new at the time. Splinter Cell was really weird, because they would have completely different versions of the game depending if it was on PlayStation or Xbox. Like, with the next gen Splinter Cell, I forget what the game was called. It was the one that had dual choices. Double Agent, that's what it was called. I remember playing it on like the Xbox 360 or whatever, and thinking that the game kind of sucked. And then I actually played it on the last generation console, so just on the original Xbox or on the PS2, and it was a completely different game, and it was so much better. And I didn't know at the time that even though it had the name Ubisoft on it, it actually had, you know, they have multiple studios underneath the company, and they actually had different studios developing the Splinter Cell games for different consoles and so on and so forth. So they were completely different, and that was the first time I'd ever had something like that happen, and it was really disappointing and kind of weird. That was where Ubisoft was getting strange. And then there was Splinter Cell Black, the most recent one, Black Ops or something. I don't know. But the most recent Splinter Cell, which it kind of sucked. It was like, it was a good game, but it was kind of just generic shooter. Sam Fisher was not the same actor anymore, which was a shame, because this new actor was just like, why? Like, it just felt like filler. And obviously the game didn't do well, so Ubisoft has kind of put the franchise on a temporary hold and hasn't really acknowledged anything about it. We do know that there's like a Netflix show coming for Splinter Cell for whatever reason. And hopefully it means that they're going to end up making another Splinter Cell game at some point. I mean, I would take it even if it didn't have the main Sam Fisher actor, but maybe it would. I don't know. The actor was Michael Ironside. That's right. And I remember I actually became a fan of him because of the Splinter Cell games, just because he's got a voice that is just, you know, there's nothing else like it.
Forget how to climb, Fisher? When Lambert asked me to show you the ropes, I didn't think he meant it literally.
Don't start, Hisham. Your support on this, remember?
And he is Sam Fisher. Okay, like anytime I would see him in movies and stuff, that was Sam Fisher. It was like, that's why I would go and watch certain movies that had him in it, specifically because I was just such a fan of Splinter Cell and of his work as Sam Fisher and everything. And it just was a shame that they ended up moving away from him. Anyways, I don't mean to hijack this video with Splinter Cell. It's just, it was such a big game for me growing up that I just wish that they would do more with it or give like a full remaster of all of them or something. Apparently, there was a Splinter Cell 1, 2, and 3 remaster, but it was on PS3. I never owned a PS3. Zelda Majora's Mask, which this is a weird one for me because I enjoyed Ocarina of Time more than Majora's Mask. I kind of found Majora's Mask to be stressful and I really disliked it. But there's something about like the character and the atmosphere of the game that it left a permanent impression on me. That level of stress and overcoming the odds with the game and having the constant timer countdown to the world ending when the moon crashes into the world and everything just ended up leaving such a huge impact on my life. Like, this is the first game I remember that I had the strategy guide for, and I was, setting it all up and I was timing everything so that I could go through all the dungeons and everything at the perfect time. And I ended up getting, I remember too, I ended up getting to there was the ocean Zora dungeon or whatever. It was like dawn of the last day as I'm going through the dungeon, and then I had to like reset all my progress, which I'm pretty sure everybody had to reset the day on the water dungeon just because it was so difficult to navigate it. But this game ended up having such a huge hold on me that even to this day I get really stressed out just thinking about playing it, despite the fact that I actually did replay. Like I played through Majora's Mask again now as an adult, and I actually have a Let's Play series of that on the channel, and it was really easy, surprisingly, to get through the game. Even the timer of the days ending and the apocalypse coming was really, really easy to navigate, despite the fact that I was still really, really stressed out playing the game, which is so weird. But this game was so impactful for me that I even have like a tattoo on my back that, cost me a lot and ended up taking a lot of time. It took like a year to end up finishing it and everything. And it's just, so next on the list, this is Nexus TK. Nexus, the Kingdom of the Winds. You guys know the company Nexon? Well, this was their first game. And Nexus was literally Nex US because this was the US servers of the game. There was a bunch of different names for the game under different languages and different regions, and those games were actually vastly different from one another. But Nexus is probably the most influential game on my life, like hands down. It was an online game. And come to think of it, it might have been one of the first MMO games. I don't know what came out before it, but Nexus was like, we're talking like older than RuneScape, dude. Like, this game came out a long, long time ago, and it enveloped my life for years. This was the first game that I dedicated years of time to. It had a subscription service. Nothing pay to win or anything like that existed at the time. But me, my brother, my cousin, and pretty much all of our friends at the time, we pretty much got everybody into this game. And we knew like everything about it, like in and out at the time. Like, there was the Ice Beast where you could get the Frost Saber at level 8. There was the museum that you could go to, and when you got all the way to the end of the museum, you could end up getting a dragon's tooth that would transform you into a dragon. And it was just cosmetic and stuff, but we just knew like everything. And my old username in it was Sephiroth Y, and then Antignorot later. The thing that was so crazy about the game was that a lot of it was player run, because I know that it just, from an outside perspective, it looks like some dinky ass like 2D. Like, it's like, what is this crap? You know, the HUD takes up like most of the screen. Obviously, the game has evolved past that and changed up the graphics and stuff. And arguably, when the graphics ended up changing, a lot of people quit. And, you know, I stayed with the game as long as I could, and eventually it just got boring. But most of all, it's just because of the influence that the new company had, because Nexus ended up selling it to Crew, which monetized the hell out of the game, and it was never the same. You know, they added this big bulky tutorial area. Anyways, the point that I'm trying to get at is the things that were most impactful with the game for me that I still feel like games nowadays miss a beat on is infinite stats. So basically what would happen in this game, Nexus, is you would get to level 99, and then from that point you were max level, and then you could, by killing creatures, you would gain experience points that you could then trade to an NPC to literally buy stats for your character, and you could end up getting like your might, your wisdom, you know, these main stats could end up getting maxed out at like 150 or something, but your health and mana in particular were infinite, and a lot of the classes ended up having their abilities scale off of that. So that's where the end game dungeons ended up coming into play, because what would happen is there would be this place called Mythic Nexus, which was like the end game. But what they would end up doing with it is, let's say you would end up going to the strongest area in the game, which was Mythic Dragon. So you would go into this area, and, you know, there would be all these creatures spawning on a regular interval and so on and so forth. And you would basically be in there with your crew clearing rooms. And eventually, when you would end up getting enough stats, you would go into Dragon 2, which would literally be the same place, but all the creatures would be colored differently. They'd be a lot stronger, and they would give you more experience. Farming for experience at the end of the game, and how the game ended up balancing the amount of experience, is that it would slowly cost more and more experience points to upgrade your stats, but the risk was that if you died, you would lose all that experience. So it was a very risk-reward scenario. And I remember Calm Wind was a warrior who had so much health that he had to actually stock up maximum experience just to end up buying a little bit more of his health pool. And it was just, there was just like so many cool things like that. A lot of the main classes in the game were run by NPCs, so you could get into those automatically. But then a lot of the subclasses were actually player ran. So if you wanted to end up becoming a barbarian, for example, which would have different abilities than the default warrior, you had to actually go and talk to the barbarian players and slowly influence your way into getting a part of that. And it's just, there was so many cool things with this game, and it was very, very community driven. Even to the point where if you ended up doing anything that would get you put into the in-game jail, you would literally have to type out, like the punishment was literally typing out this message, like it was like 100 times or something like that. It was ridiculous based on the amount of sentencing that you had. And I just remember like me and my brother and my cousin, we did so much crazy shit in this game where we ended up like, we were such scumbags. We ended up like sneaking into the judges' quarters. So the judges, which were literally like the game mods, were players. They weren't people that worked for Nexon. It was all player ran. So obviously with that came a lot of corruption, which kind of made it fun. But I remember we ended up, my cousin got summoned into the judges' quarters because that's where they would usually end up going to, you know, talk to you about stuff. And he ended up going invisible as the rogue, and he logged out. And then like a day later, he like came back in, and he like snuck into the recorders, and like basically it's all this stuff that you're not supposed to see as a player, and we were seeing it all firsthand, you know. Unfortunately, the game sucks now. It got sold to a different company and became very pay to win, but that game has just, there's so many stories that I could tell you guys with that game. There was even one event, last story before we move on, because otherwise I could just keep going. There was this event called the Wind Event, where they had these super overpowered creatures actually ended up attacking the in-game towns, and the towns ended up like dynamically changing the map, where they were all like distraught and destructed, and there would be these wind creatures, and it was just chaos everywhere, to the point where there was open player versus player in the city. And I killed so many new players. Because basically they would come out of this tutorial house. So I would just wait out there, killing them. And then, you know, you had to be careful because sometimes there'd be these people that would come by trying to stop you and be a good person. And, you know, generally I would kill them too because I was hiding behind the house so that when they showed up, oh, good Lord. Such an amazing game. Experiences like that was back when things were not all squeaky clean like they are with games nowadays. Like, it's exciting and it's very sad at the same time that that doesn't exist anymore. And it was just a different time, you know? Not only just the game itself, but the experiences around the game, because everybody I knew was playing it because we convinced everybody to play it. And it was just such a good time. And that kind of childish, whimsical excitement, it's not there as an adult, you know? It's different now, and I feel that, and it is very, very sad. Anyways, moving on. So, Halo, I think it's pretty obvious why this one's on the list. Halo was very weird and very different for me at the time. Obviously, everybody was into Halo at the time. And it's still one of the best games of all time, like Halo 1, 2, and 3 specifically, all the ones that Bungie worked on. 343, you know, the new company working on them, I don't really care that much. I don't really like the new Halo games as much as the old ones, and that's not just being nostalgic. It's literally you play the new ones versus the old one, and if you can get past the fact that the old one is older, they're definitely better, more solid games. Anyways, with Halo, more so it was the social experience, because Halo was one of those games where, you know, Xbox Live wasn't a thing with Halo 1. So a lot of the, you know, a lot of playing this game was actually LAN parties. So, you know, my cousin had an Xbox and we would go over to other people's houses and stuff with our Xbox just so we could play the multiplayer together or play through the campaign together and stuff. And I remember, even though Xbox Live wasn't really a thing, not as much as with Halo 2 specifically, there was these tricks that you could do with Halo 1. I don't remember what it was specifically, but I do remember that we actually did end up playing a game online with other people. It was really tricky because you had to basically use this other third-party software. And when we were playing with these guys, like we played with these guys for like hours, because it wasn't like normal to play a game online like that, especially on consoles, you know? And I remember, like, we were all kind of just having so much fun with it, even though whether we were losing, winning, you know, just hiding for like 5 minutes on the map or something like that. It was so fun, you know, just very guilty-ridden fun. And then moving on to Halo 2, obviously that had a huge impact on my life. I'd met so many people through Xbox Live that I wish I still had contact with, frankly speaking, because they were just such crazy people. But I don't know, I kind of had this weird thing in my life where I always wanted to kind of clean the slate. You start from scratch, you'll make new friends again, kind of thing. It's just, I don't know, I think it was some weird thing of feeling vulnerable, letting people in. I don't know, I've tried working on that for years, but even nowadays I know that I still put my wall up sometimes, but at least I'm more aware of it. But anyways, with Halo 2, you know, there was so many people that I ended up meeting through it, and I played with them all the way up to, I think, the Xbox 360 with like GTA 5 and stuff. Like, a lot of these people I still kept in contact with since Halo 2. But somewhere along the lines around then, I kind of lost contact with them. I think most of all it's because when I was, you know, making content, I was still doing YouTube, I think, around when GTA 5 came out, but obviously with the type of game that it is and the fact that I was trying to move into being family friendly at the time, and so because of it, I kind of lost touch with a lot of those people because they were just normal dudes like I am now in my videos where they swear and all that stuff. But whatever, you know, it's not that big a deal. I don't like regret it or anything. It's just I remember fondly the memories of playing Halo 2 with them. I think the other reason why I might have moved on from those people and just moved on from that aspect of my life and did the whole clean slate thing that I mentioned is because around then I was very competitive. I was very into the competitive side of video games, and it just, frankly speaking, it wasn't fun. Like, it was fun to a degree, but over competitive. It just, I don't know, that was around the time where competitive gaming was slowly starting to turn toxic, like it just naturally is now. Like, competitive gaming is some of the most toxic shit ever, but back then it was still okay. And I think that's kind of where I was reading the room and not really enjoying the type of person that I was and the type of people that I was around in that competitive environment, where it was like, I don't really care about trying to be good at this game. I just want to have fun with it. And so now I just play games casually, despite the fact that I'm still a very competitive person by nature. I genuinely enjoy games a lot more now than I did ever before. Battlefield 1942. I mean, what can I say? This was one of my all-time favorite times in my life, one of my favorite games. This is another game like Nexus where everybody I knew was playing this, and I remember we even got multiple PCs just so that when my cousins and friends could end up coming over and stuff, we would be able to play this with them. Not like good PCs by any means, but Battlefield was just one of those games where everything could kind of run it. And this was a game where my dad played it with us and everything. And we always just played against bots. We never played it online because we had like some cracked version of the game, so we couldn't play online even if we wanted to. And it was more fun just playing bots anyways and just having fun with it. And I just have such fond memories of it. I remember we also ended up playing with a lot of Battlefield 1942 had so many mods. There was like Pirates versus Ninjas. One of the big ones was Desert Combat. Which basically, you know, it was Battlefield 1942, so it had like World War I and II tanks and whatever, or maybe it was just World War I stuff. I don't know. Anyways, it had like all these old ass vehicles and stuff, and so there was this mod called Desert Combat, and that had like Apache helicopters and more modern guns and stuff, and it was probably one of the best mods of the Battlefield game. And funny enough, the company DICE that, you know, made Battlefield ended up actually hiring the people that made the Desert Combat mod, and they are still working on the Battlefield franchise today, which is an awesome thought. But I remember I got really, really good at using the helicopters, and there was this one moment that's etched in my mind where my cousin was on the minigun of one of the helicopters, and it was really difficult to get a kill with it just because of the fact that the helicopter literally was like flying on a golf ball. But I was so good at it that I was able to basically fly around in circles, just pulling up and catching myself before the helicopter would spin out, while giving him a distinct aiming angle so he could just shoot down on where all the bots were spawning. And I just remember that so fondly, where we were having so much fun with it. He got like so many kills from it, and it was a good time, man. So anyways, moving on to the last game of the pot. The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, which I can still picture the song and the title screen. We played this on Xbox, not on PC. And it was me, my brother, and my cousin that were super into this game. And I remember the way that he described the game to me was he said that, oh, you can do anything in this game. You could take a fork and go to a castle, and you could like, kill a bunny and like make it food or something. And obviously you couldn't do any of that stuff. The world was a lot more fantastical than he described. But I still remember that. And I just remember the game and how much time I spent in it. And I mean, I can't really say anything in terms of my memories of the game, other than just it being such a good time, because that was around the time too where basically what my brother and I ended up doing growing up was we would end up playing games for an hour each. So I would play a game for an hour, and then it was his turn, and then he would play a game for an hour. Morrowind came around and kind of just got rid of all of that, where basically however long one person played, the other person would end up getting that long of a play session. So suddenly we're looking at, I'm playing for 2 hours, my brother's playing for 2 hours, my cousin comes over, he gets to play for 2 hours. Maybe during my brother's session he plays for 3 hours, and then my cousin gets 3 hours, and then I get 3 hours, and it just it was in no way being frustrated at the amount of time that each other was playing, because we enjoyed watching each other playing the game just as much as playing it ourselves, because we would end up discovering, you know, some new shit or some new gear that was in a dungeon or so on and so forth, and then we would tell each other about it. And I remember very, very distinctly, and I think this is why Morrowind had such an impact on us, we specifically decided not to look anything up on the internet. We wanted a genuine experience of ourselves exploring this world and finding all of the items in it. And, you know, after we ended up putting, like, I don't know how many hundreds of hours into the game and sharing our experiences of it, like the blinding boots of speed, and how my character was an orc, so I had a natural immunization to magic curses, and so with the blinding boots of speed, my screen turned really dark, but I could still see where I was going, and so they were really useful for me, whereas my cousin and my brother didn't end up having that resistance, so they couldn't even use the blinding boots of speed, you know, jumping around all over the map so that we could level up our jump skill, and eventually you'd leap into the air at Mach speeds, and it was just a lot of fun. But anyways, after so many hours that we ended up putting into the game, eventually we started looking on the internet and finding out that, oh, some of the best weapons in the game were very easily accessible. We didn't even know about it because it was like hidden in, you know, you'd go to like a guard outpost and you'd find like this sword hidden on top of a cabinet that you would never otherwise look in. And that was the thing about Morrowind, is they had every little corner of the world was really, really fleshed out and meticulously designed. And a lot of that is gone from the modern games and modern Elder Scrolls games because of how clean, you know, and how whitewashed everything is nowadays. Where, not to say that Skyrim isn't a phenomenal game and I didn't enjoy my time with it, but it didn't have the same experience of Morrowind, where I ended up going to one of the slaver camps and I noticed that one of the dudes ended up having a Daedric greatsword, and he was apparently one of 3 NPCs or something like that that had that sword. And so I ended up slaughtering everyone just so that I could end up killing this one guy to get the sword off of him, just because I thought it looked cool. And I was like, what is that piece of gear? Because that was back when you saw someone with a piece of gear, you could kill them and take it. And you could kind of just do whatever you wanted in those times, you know? Not like Skyrim nowadays, where the only way you're ever getting Daedric gear is if your character is a high enough level. Daedric gear will start showing up in the loot pool. Anyways, yeah, those were the most influential games on my life. And looking back on it is just a trip, an incredible ride. So hopefully you guys ended up enjoying this video. There's probably, you know, there's not much more else that I can say about it, about any of these titles. It's probably going to take me a while to edit this because obviously it's a long video, but I'm also going to have to try and somehow find footage or screenshots of the things that I talked about, or at least close enough to them to insert them into the footage, and so on and so forth, just to kind of get my point across. But I'm very, very grateful that I've been able to not only play video games, but to be able to do them for a living. I know that I say that a lot in my videos where I like say thanks for watching and so on and so forth, but I am seriously like so happy with my life and my job, and that's directly because of you guys watching. You know, all of these games and stuff were just the influence that ended up making me the person that I am today. But it's you guys and gals that are kind of the next step for me. So you guys watching my videos and being able to make a living from doing YouTube is kind of a culmination of all of these games that we're talking about today, where I get to have my own schedule, make my own hours, do as much or as little work as I feel like doing at the time. And I've always been, as you can see with these titles and some of the others that I didn't mention, but could have very easily been on some sort of a list, I've always been very passionate about video games. I love video games. They are my favorite thing in the entire universe, you know, and the fact that I have a job relating to it is a dream come true, because I can still remember back when I was growing up and just wishing that I would either, you know, have some sort of a career that was involved in video games. So thank you. Thank you for watching, and thank you guys for always being there for me, because I'm always going to be here for you, you know, not to get all sappy and shit, but I'm just really, really happy, you know, and I'm really happy that I did this video. I wasn't expecting to be on this kind of euphoric feeling, but being able to kind of relive these memories with you guys is good. It's very bittersweet because, like I said, you know, a lot of this stuff, it's gone and it's not coming back. And honestly, I'm not trying to kind of rekindle that or have that come back. But it's like, as you get older, things like this, you know, it kind of makes me a little bit sad because I still remember a time when video games was my entire life. Not to say that video games aren't still as important to me as ever, but, you know, I didn't have to make money. I didn't have to think about anything. And growing up, I'm part of the generation where you were ostracized for playing video games. You were kind of a freak. You were kind of a nerd. Nowadays, video game is so casual to the point where the term casual, you know, is a sense of endearment for people. And I still remember, you know, being made fun of and being really sad about, like, you know, playing video games because I didn't understand why nobody was as passionate as I was about these works of art, frankly speaking. But now that's normal, which is just such a crazy concept. And I'm just very grateful for that because it means that I can play video games for a living. And there's more to it than just dollars and cents. Thank you so much for watching. Wholeheartedly, guys, I love you very much. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. These aren't very common that we get to have these heart-to-hearts, but I hope that in some way you ended up enjoying the journey that I just took you guys down. Low-key, I'm hoping to see some people that played Nexus in the comments, okay? But, I mean, if you guys are interested enough to tell me your 9 favorite games, and I mean, I don't know how long you can leave how long you can end up typing out a comment, but you could at least talk about some of the most influential games for you. Maybe not necessarily all 9 of them. You could either just give a simple list or just talk about the games that were the most influential for you, so long as the comment section permits it, or you could even just leave a reply to your own comment. I don't really expect that many of you to end up saying, but I just would be very curious to hear. Anyways, bye guys.